This event tonight takes place every first Wednesday of the month, but there's a little something different about tonight's event. It's a collaborative event. It's an event that is not just about myself and my team and the people behind Michael Esposito Inc. and the people behind Den10, but also the people behind the New Pulse Connective. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that, but I think you may know Julie, who's here with us tonight, and Nicole, who's here with us tonight as well. And I'll share a little bit more about how this kind of came to be. But first, I have a question for all of you. And the question is, what does collaboration mean to you? What does it mean in your life? Anybody care to share? Just shout it out loud. You could shout anything.
Helping each other.
Helping each other.
Working together.
Working together. Anybody else?
Using your talents in a positive way.
Using your talents in a positive way. So many great ways that we can collaborate together. Also, another question for all of you. How does collaborating make you feel? When you're in a collaborative relationship, when you're in a collaborative partnership, how does that make you feel?
Energized.
Energized. I love it. We're just getting ready for the NBC event later. We're just doing a little interaction right now. So for me, when I think about collaboration, I think about unity. I think about partnerships. I think about teamwork. I think about coming together and working towards a greater good. That's what collaboration means to me, and there's many different definitions, but this is how I see collaboration. And when I ask myself, how does it make me feel? I'm energized. I'm excited. I could feel it coursing through my veins. I could feel it in my body. I'm excited. I received a phone call a few weeks ago, and on the other line was Nicole. And Nicole said, hey Michael, I have a question for you. You mentioned that your Take Action is taking place on Wednesday. Today's December 7th, right? Just help me out here, because sometimes I mess these dates up. Wednesday, December 7th. Probably should have confirmed that before I gave the speech. We, Julie and I, want to host our New Pulse Connective event that night. And, we don't want to compete with you, we want to be able to work with you, and we were wondering, what do you think about collaborating with us that night? And I swear to you, I was driving, I'm listening to her, my eyes open wide, huge smile comes upon my face, I give her silence on the phone, so she's probably freaking out, because I had energy running through me. I had no response for her because I was so excited. And what did I say to you? No, I don't remember. What did you say?
You said, well, what do you think?
That's right. Well, that's what I was going to. I said to her, I didn't answer her. I said, what do you think I'm thinking right now? And go ahead.
Can I say that out loud?
Go ahead.
I said, fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. I don't normally curse, but I mean, it deserves it in this one. Because she was so excited. And that's what collaboration feels like. It actually happens in this way. Collaboration can happen anywhere in our lives. It can happen in business, it can happen at home, and it can happen in sports. Just happen to have one of my basketball buddies here, so he'll really know how I felt it this night. I play in a basketball league, a men's league, 35 and over. It's a fun league, and I have a great team. So great, in fact, that we won the championship last year. I wish those applause were for me. Because I didn't feel like a contributor. I didn't feel like I played a role on the team. I had a really great team. I had two great stars on the team who could score the ball, who could move the ball at will. But they didn't involve the team. They were the team. They were the ones who were able to score all the shots and make all the assists and all the other defensive plays that needed to be made. There was no room for the rest of us. Now, I enjoyed playing with them. I'm very happy to have won the championship. But in that instance, I don't feel proud about the championship. I don't feel disappointed about the championship. I just feel neutral. And that's what happens, and that's the feeling that we have when there's a lack of collaboration. There's a neutral, a blah. Okay, cool, we won. So what could I have done differently? I'm not exactly sure that season, but this season I decided to do something different. In our very first scrimmage, I didn't touch the ball for 4 possessions. I was really pissed. So I decided to storm off the court and start screaming expletives at my team. Well, that was not a very good situation or look for Michael, the league commissioner. But of course, I went back to my coach and I thought about it. And I reflected on this. And this is where we tie business to life, to sports, to everything we do. Because this had an impact on my life. And so I reflected on my actions. And what could I have done differently? What could any of us do differently when we're in a situation, in a partnership, in a business relationship, in a relationship where we don't feel like we're contributing or that we're a part of the relationship, collaborating together? And what we can do is, to use the sports analogy, we can call a timeout. We can take a timeout. Hey, just give me a timeout. Let's just take some time apart for a second. Let's just put a pause on this project for a second. And we can start asking some really strong, powerful questions. How can we can ask these leaders that are part of our groups, on our teams and everything, how can we work together towards the mission? What is the mission that we all see in this together? How can I help serve towards this goal together? And if I can call a timeout, and I can say that to my teammates, I know that my teammates on the court will support those questions, and will answer them, and will think of ways that they can involve me in the game. And it's the same thing in the game of life, and it's the same thing in the game of business. To take a timeout and say, how can I contribute to this plan? How can I contribute to this project? How can we move forward together? And that's what collaboration can look like in our lives and in our businesses. Tonight, we're all working towards a greater good, and we have a great panel of collaborators. And I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful panel of collaborators at this time. I'm going to have to read this part. She's built an international business that creates activities and environments that help kids live and learn better. She's on a mission to help neurodivergent children everywhere. CEO and founder of Fit and Fun Playscapes, Pamela Gunther. Please welcome her. He is a 2-time Emmy Award-nominated director of photography and producer. He works with mission-driven organizations to help them positively impact their communities through value-driven content. Chief Legendeer of Talix Media, Tom Langan. An unapologetic fashionista, optimist, and dreamer. She founded an executive concierge service catering to the growing demands of dynamic businesses in the Hudson Valley. CEO and founder of Pepper Executive Concierge, she is Cecile Castellan Weinstein. And she did don some beautiful shoes that are right behind her. I'm going to have to turn them around for you, Cecile, I promise. So grab your mics. Our audience, you are welcome to partake. Just raise your hand if one of our panelists says something that resonates with you or that you would like to ask a question about. But we will start our panel discussion. Panelists, are you ready? Let's go.
Ready, let's do it.
All right. So every single one of you have created tremendous impact in your communities. You've done this in multiple ways. And I'm just interested, I'm sure we all here are interested in how you went about creating this impact in your communities. Any one of you can take that.
Okay, they're all looking at me, so I guess I'll start. So my background is architecture, and that's how I started my career. And so I feel like collaboration was ingrained for 5 years in my head. That's basically, a very creative field, and you're not in a vacuum. And so I spent a lot of time, and it was very important to get that collaboration, that input from your peers. Translating that into a business and just a mindset is a totally different thing. But there's a lot of similarities as well. So for me, working in the education field, collaborating with experts or newbies and everybody in between, that's who, that's my community. As an owner of a small business, I really try to get feedback from the people that I'm selling to, and that feedback and that collaboration only makes a better product and a better service. So from a business perspective, that's how I embrace collaboration.
Yeah, and we met through a collaborative effort where we were at a networking event, and more than just sharing about the playscapes, you were telling me more about how you're working with other people in the community as well. Tom, you were going to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I mean, everything I do is a collaborative effort. In the work that I do, it is not just important but crucial to collaborate from the first conversation with my clients, but then eventually as we move into later stages of production, collaborating with the team that we put together to execute on the project, and then collaborating with the distributors that then put the content out in front of audiences. Everything that I do from concept development and ideation all the way through the project and on to final delivery is really a collaborative process. And it's crucial that it is, because at the end of the day, I'm there to help businesses communicate more effectively with the communities that they serve. They know their communities better than I do. They know their products better than I do. They know their businesses better than I do. And so we have to work together in order to maximize the potential of the impact that we can have in the work that we do together. So everything that I do from jump is collaborative.
You and I have had a lot of experience collaborating on things, and so when you just said that you care really more about how they are impacting their communities, kind of something along those lines there, I'm interested in some of the questions that you might ask these clients that you work with in order for you guys to collaborate on a better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the standard conversations I have when I'm initially sitting down to work with someone is I use analogies a lot. So anybody that knows me knows I've got like a pocket full of analogies that I like to trot out and use all the time. So I use this analogy in that first conversation very frequently, and that is that I treat content production like a road trip. And when I first started driving, I can show my age a little bit, that when I started driving, my parents gave me a random McNally road atlas so that I could get around, right? Because we didn't have GPS, we didn't have smartphones. So the thing that you learn pretty quickly when you're using a road atlas to plan a road trip is the first thing you have to do is pick the destination, right? You have to know where you want to go. And then you get out the road atlas and you start planning the route, right? And then lastly, once you've done all of that work in advance, then you can start loading the car, packing up, making sure there's gas in the tank, and getting ready to start the drive, and eventually getting in the car and driving. So that's the way typically I approach collaborating with a client, is the first thing I need to know is where are we going? What are we hoping to accomplish? What do we want the end result to be? And then we backwards engineer the entire process from that.
Which is obviously so important. I think while you're telling that, I'm going back to my basketball story of like, if I speak to my team and I know they want to win a championship, then that's what we're working towards. Very similar in that. Cecile?
Yeah, there's a lot of vision boarding involved in collaborating. So you are a visionary and you've worked with several other visionaries. So it's all about really kind of thinking about, okay, where are we going, where are we headed, and what's the meaningful endeavor that we're all working towards, right? And how do we get there, basically. So that's what Tom was saying. So for me, I was raised in a multicultural and a multilingual community, and collaborating with everyone is very inherent because, you know, part of that is there's a language barrier. So there's a lot of effort to even communicate what your feelings are or what you want to do. So you gotta listen and you gotta hear what other people are what they're saying, so that you can also understand where they're coming from, right? So I feel like for me, with collaboration, it takes a lot of like listening and then hearing also what their vision is, and so that from there you can work together towards that.
In the environment that we're in, and also in the Hudson Valley region, there's a lot of different languages that are spoken. Spanish, obviously, being a very highly spoken language, and so there's so many collaborators in the room who might be dealing with and working with people that speak a different language. I'm interested in some of the techniques or strategies that you use to be able to work with in these like multi-language, lingual situations.
Well, ideally, it would be great to immerse, because that's really the best way to learn their culture. But if that's not quite possible, because sometimes immersion, it depends. It might be a short time or it might be a long time. So if you are not able to really learn the language per se, then again, collaborate with someone who does and can help with the interpretation, and then learn from them. Basically, do your own research when you're coming to a new community. And it also applies even in our regular day-to-day. When you want to collaborate with someone, like learn about their background, learn what their work is, before asking, basically. In that way, you would also know where they're coming from, and you could give them like the value that they also might be needing before you ask for anything, before you ask for any kind of you help me and I'll help you. So
cool. Do we have any audience members that have any questions at this time? Julie, yes, go ahead.
So how do you handle, like, when you're collaborating with another person or a group? Obviously, there's going to be differences of opinion, or maybe even different visions. So how do you handle that?
So what Julie just asked is, how do you handle working with different groups or different organizations who might have a different vision? Our panel, go ahead.
I mean, I'll stick with the automotive theme of my prior analogy. There's only one driver, right? So while the driver may, it should, not may, while the driver should take into consideration the thoughts and opinions and ideas of other people in the car, they're the one at the wheel steering. So you can only ever have one driver. And it's important that you delineate who that person is early on in the project. I typically, when I work with clients, I look to take that role over because I have a lot of experience driving a car, driving that creative process, right? And often they don't. And it's a unique style of working. It's a unique kind of process, and I think it takes a while to sort of learn and develop a skill set around that. So that's my area of expertise, and that's one of the ways that I work to help my clients and collaborate with them.
If I can build upon that,
Absolutely.
I love that analogy, the automotive or the basketball one, right? So there's a team captain for a reason. Someone's got to drive the ship. I don't have a business degree, but I've learned a lot in 11 years where we're open, and one of the biggest challenges is who's controlling the meeting, who's in charge, who's taking notes. I know it sounds mundane, looks like a very creative group here, but somebody's got to lead. And getting control of a meeting is really important, or else it's inefficient and you will lose people. I had started to look at EOS, which is an entrepreneurial operating system. Have you heard it? Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of different programs out there, and it really broke it down into simple terms. I won't name any particular one, but basically, you have an agenda, right? You have a goal. You've got 1 hour, because nobody can pay attention more than 1 hour, and it's a hard stop after an hour, or else that meeting can get out of control, and it can go left and right in all different ways. So, from a practical sense, someone's got to take control, and someone's got to have that framework to drive that meeting.
yes, and that's how civilizations were built. When people get together in a room, and then it's sometimes there's psychological study about this actually. And they put people in one room and then they leave them there for just like minutes, hours. And within 20 minutes, people start, okay, so what are we doing here? Like, no one's moderating. And then, natural leaders, they just step up and say, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. No instruction, no nothing. So let's group ourselves into, that's the way we are as humans. We instinctively build upon nothing, so to speak. We start from scratch. So we assign roles to ourselves. The natural leaders would delegate, and those people who are natural at providing support, then they would say, oh, okay, I see that leader, and I see, that they seem capable, they have the charisma, like, I want to support that person. And then they can help rally the troops, so to speak, in order to start doing something.
And that doesn't mean it's only the leader.
Yeah.
True collaboration is the leader figures out who has the special talents unique to whatever the task is. And they, like the captain of the basketball team, they have to really excite and inspire everybody on that team who wants to be there. Because sometimes people don't want to be on the meetings. You can spot them a mile away. But you really need to try to embrace and bring out the best in the entire group and make sure that their skills match their enthusiasm and match the goals.
I totally agree. I think.
Sorry, it's a great question.
Yeah, no, and I just wanted to add on one little thing, and I think that at the end of the day, good leadership really has two things, or there are two things that are incumbent to good leadership. One is good listening. Good leaders are always good listeners. And then the other thing is the ability to empower your team to deliver their best. Ultimately, as a leader, that's really your primary function, is to be the person that empowers your team to deliver their best work. So yeah, I think those two things are incumbent on the driver of the automobile.
Come on in if you're just coming in. Grab a seat, there's plenty of room. Squeeze next to someone, don't worry, you're fine. While you guys were talking about this leadership and these different ideas and sitting around the table, I would love to kind of go down the path of the EOS, and I think it would be beneficial to everyone about what that looks like and setting an agenda in a meeting and having some sort of, call it control of the meeting. Not the best word to use, but that's what I'm going to use right now. But the question that comes to mind for me in terms of collaboration for you is a kind of a curveball to what you just said. And I'll use your analogy, Tom, in that you're driving a car and you're the leader of a team, the captain of a basketball team, a leader of a team, the driver of the car, captain of the ship, all the different analogies. But in collaboration with another business, you have another driver. You have another captain. And I'm wondering, how do you put two steering wheels in that car? And I know we have a driver education teacher who has two steering wheels in his car. And Paul Odendahl, if you need some driver education classes, he's right there, plus defensive driving and licensing and all the other stuff. But back to our show here. What do we do when we have two strong leaders? Two leaders that embody the qualities that you just mentioned here, of being great listeners, of being great leaders, of rising to the top. And they have two great organizations. And they want to work together towards a common goal. The question is, how do you bring these leaders together to collaborate?
I mean, from my perspective, I think really it just comes down to clearly defining roles and clearly defining expectations for each of those roles, right? And that's something that can be done, peer to peer. It doesn't have to be done down the hierarchy with only one person sort of in the captain's chair, right? So to speak. So yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to clearly defining roles, who's responsible for what the expectations are on each other. And I think the best partnerships and the partnerships that work for the longest and are the most enduring and beneficial are built on clearly defined roles that do not cross over, but rather complement each other.
To build on that, I break it down into three parts. One, you crash and burn, right? Power struggle, it's not going to work out. No one's going to benefit. Two, you collaborate with, or you divide and conquer, clear lanes, and you stay in your lanes, and as two great leaders, they should understand that that is how it has to work. And so you have to have those clearly defined, like I said, lanes and roles. Or the third option is you take turns, right? It's kind of like, sorry, the playground for me, right? You've got three options. And so, you're assuming, and my customers are typically repeat customers, and someone's the leader the first time, and someone's the vice or the assistant, and you reverse for the next project. So there's a couple of different ways I think you can slice and dice that situation.
Cool, so kind of just to recap here, so we have chemistry, we have staying in your lane, and we have these roles, these clearly defined roles. And something Tom just mentioned that I thought was really important is it sounds like from the onset of the relationship is defining those roles. Pam, you were just talking about these three different scenarios. I'm interested if you can kind of just break down the staying in the lane, as you just said, what that looks like, and how that can be productive towards the end goal.
Yeah, so, and again, I've learned this the hard way. I've seen meetings and efforts and opportunities and collaborations go all different ways, and the best ones are those that are clearly defined with a plan, with an agenda, and then bringing it back to actual roles. Define those roles. And the more granular you can get, the better you are. It protects everybody. And it sounds mundane, I know it does, but it is so important, and it really just helps the whole process be efficient. And there's really true clarity, and you'll get a really successful endeavor for sure.
I do want to make sure that our audience knows you can partake. Just raise your hand. We would love. Oh, go ahead, Paul. And yes, I see you, Sonia.
A question for the panel. In collaboration, both for the members in this group collaborating and the leadership, what are your thoughts on the importance of the person who emerges as a natural leader and their ability to adapt to intellectual differences, to cultural differences, to emotional differences, especially in our society in 2022?
I would like to try to repeat that whole question.
A lot to unpack, but I love that question.
Paul, can I just run up a list? Can you come a little closer and just repeat that last sentence for me, please?
Michael, get too old. All right, so the question is, in collaboration and within the group collaborating, and the leader that naturally comes forth, what are your thoughts on the leader's ability to adapt to different intellectual levels of individuals within that group, emotional levels within that group, in your particular case, cultural differences within that group? I think a leader, in my opinion, I think a leader has to have a strong ability, especially in 2022, to adapt. Because you're going to have many, many thoughts, differences, and opinions that are occurring within groups, especially in today's society.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
You have that one, Tom.
Yeah, I think, so when I said before that I think a leader's primary role is to empower their team to do their job to the best of their ability, I think a way to do that, or one of the best ways to do that, is with empathy, right? And I think empathy allows someone in a leadership position to do their best, or with empathy, a person in a leadership position can do their best to appreciate and understand where each of their team members is coming from, their unique perspectives, and then can use and can accept those perspectives, right? If they're an empathetic person, can accept those perspectives, and then in doing so, work towards creating a pathway for that person to achieve at the highest level in the course of executing that project or executing on that vision. So yeah, I think empathy is really crucial in leadership in order for leaders to really empower their teams to achieve at the highest level to their full potential in the execution of their work.
Thanks, Tom. I love that you said empathy. And I was thinking about Cecile when she was talking about that chemistry and that dynamic that these leaders can share through relationships and through chemistry. And you're a very emotion-driven individual. So I love that Tom teed you up with empathy. So I am interested in your feelings on this.
All right. So, yes, I completely agree with what Tom said. Empathy, compassion, and at the same time, an ideal leader would be someone that would be, and you will understand this in your world, be able to like, okay kids, kind of like, okay kids, let's all get along here.
Corral them.
Yes, because the truth is, as you know, in all the collaborations you've probably done with other people, it's not always like a bed of roses. It's not always like easy breezy. Sometimes we do collaborate with people that we don't necessarily get along with, or we may not necessarily agree with, you know, in multiple levels. And that doesn't mean that we should stop collaborating, right? It just means that, and it just means that we gotta work better in communicating, and like, that's what the ideal leader would say, okay, so we'll be able to identify, okay, so, all right, these two people there might be some, they might find common ground in something, and then perhaps this particular assignment would work for both of them, right?
Absolutely.
And I like that you use the word communication. So now I am going to bring the mic. I can make it all the way to you.
So I think sometimes you have to be a cat herder.
Yes,
A little bit.
exactly.
Yeah, and you have to apply, that when you make the decision of whatever it is, you have to be careful. You can't pick and choose what that tolerance is for a particular employee or collaborator. You have to think it through and say, okay, I've made a decision here, I understand the situation. And I've learned the hard way, then you have to apply it to your entire group, because they will call you out on being unfair.
Exactly.
So,
No favoritism.
You just have to be fair.
Yep.
You have to apply it to that whole group, and it gets tricky.
I have two questions, I hope that's okay. My first one is, what role do you see, in a collaboration, ego and decision making? So when it comes to a lot of collaborations, decision making ends up being, we go this way, we go that way. And when ego starts to play a role, I'm curious how you guys have seen that played out.
I want to answer that because I've been dying to say this since like the beginning. Because especially my experience, you work with smart people, incredibly, intuitive people, incredibly people that are at the top of their fields, And it's inevitable that you would clash because one might think, oh, my way is the better way. So, I mean, it would be nice if the rest of the world would take my advice that I'm telling you right now. But I'm telling this to all of you right now. We're sitting here, and if you could, at least one of you or three of you would apply this in your daily lives, the world would be a much better place. Check your ego at the door. When you're collaborating with someone, just like leave that there. And sometimes someone might say something that might be mildly offensive. I mean, of course, you can confront them, or you could also say, is it really worth, confronting that? Or perhaps, we could just continue working on this, and if they say it again, then maybe, So not be a pushover, but at the same time, exercise self-control, again, check your ego at the door. Otherwise, nothing's gonna be done.
Second question?
Oh, wait, did you want to say?
I was just gonna say, I mean, you should never be making decisions, business decisions or decisions in a collaborative forum purely on ego, right? But I think there is a little bit of a balance to be struck, and you have to be willing to stand for what you know to be the best process in the service of the goal that you're there to accomplish, right? So if you do genuinely believe that you know a better way to do it than what's being proposed, you have to have enough confidence in yourself to stand up for that and to say it. But you should never be making decisions purely based on ego. It should always go through that filter of whether or not it is in service of the goal that you're there to accomplish. And if the answer is yes, then maybe it's okay to have a little bit of confidence in what you're saying and believe in yourself, because otherwise you're going to end up being a wallflower and not actually participating or bringing value to the team. So I think there's a little bit of a balance to be struck, but yeah, no decisions based on purely on ego.
Yeah, I mean, ego's a big thing. I work in a male-dominated field. I went to 5 years of school with mostly dudes next to me, and sorry fellas, there's a lot of egos. And so I've learned to navigate that world in a different way when it comes back to listening. And when it's not a big deal to me, I let it go. If it's a big deal to me, I don't let it go. My husband's in the audience. He knows this exactly how it is. But as a leader and as a collaborator, right, and if you're working together, the whole goal is it's shared. It's not one person. And so checking your ego at the door is critical. It's part of the ground rules, because you wouldn't have collaboration if everybody's gotta be the big person out there. It just won't work.
Thank you guys. And my second question is, have you ever outgrown a collaboration? And if so, what did you do to ensure that the relationship would still stay intact?
That's tough.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Ghost them.
Can you guys see the smoke? The wheels are turning.
Do I need the lights?
No, I don't.
Tommy, want me to start while you're
You
going?
go ahead. You go ahead.
And
I'm just gonna watch the smoke coming out of my ears. I can't think of one.
Excuse me. I'm not sure I'm going to answer you exactly the way you want it or you intended the question, but I've had relationships where I just felt that it wasn't going anywhere. Business relationships. And those are hard. But you're doing everybody involved a disservice if you continue the relationship. And so you've got to, first of all, my business started as a volunteer effort in my community. I painted games on the playground at my children's school. So when you ask that question, I'm like, does that apply? Did I outgrow my community? My answer is no, it just changed. And it changed so that I could still contribute and support them in a different way. But I can't go back out, and I've done it 4 times. I can no longer go back out and paint those games anymore. So if you apply maybe that perspective, and again, I'm not sure if I am answering your question perfectly or accurately or even in the same ballpark, but you've got to know when it's time to move on, or the person has to move on, because you're just, it's not going to be good for either side or the group.
I 100% agree. I can't think of a specific example, but there are definitely times in my career where I have moved on from a working relationship at periods, different periods for a variety of different reasons. And I think ultimately, the same is true whether it's a working relationship or a collaboration, between team members or different businesses or within a singular business. It's like any other relationship. Often the initial separation is a little bit messy, a little bit painful, and a little bit uncomfortable. But if ultimately you're separating for the right reasons, if you're leaving that collaboration for the right reasons, I believe that most of the time, you can't control other people's actions, right? You can only control your own. But if you're leaving for the right reasons and you handle yourself well and professionally, then over time, even if there are some hurt feelings initially, over time, those tend to heal, and you can still maintain good relationships. I have good relationships with people that I worked with 20 years ago, that we parted ways, that we had disagreements, in the course of doing our work, but we still stay in touch, we still keep up with each other. But it's because we knew it was for the best for both of us to move on. And it wasn't in spite of each other, it was for the betterment of each other. So I think if you're doing it for the right reasons, usually it all kind of works out in the end, but you have to give it time. It's always a little bit messy at the beginning.
Do you want to add to that, Cecile?
Okay. So I'm digging a little deep here because my background is nursing, and normally when you begin a relationship with a client or a patient, whether it's short term or long term, when you first come in, let's say to the room, just a quick example. Hello, Mr. Esposito, I will be your nurse for today. I'll be here with you for 8 hours. So kind of like give the patient the expectation of what the duration of the relationship, right? So that by the time it's like 6 hours, they're gonna start, Mr. Esposito, I'm only gonna be here for 2 more hours. I'll be checking your IV, blah, blah, blah. And then in a couple of hours, my another nurse will relieve me, right? In the ideal world, we would be able to predict the duration of the relationship or the collaboration. When you work for a company, normally, when you work, when you are an officer in our organization, you have a term. Let's say, for example, a secretary, you have like a 3-year term or whatnot. Ideally, it would be great to set the terms right in the beginning. But if that's not possible, and this is an actionable step, I do advise to inform the person, like, at a meeting, a formal meeting, or even you can do it in person, it's better. If not possible, then you can do it in Zoom. And just be really, upfront about the reasons that you're deciding to move on. Because you never know, maybe that person's also thinking about it the same way. They're also probably ready to move on. And they're also hesitating because they're thinking about your feelings. Also like, oh, you know what, I really feel like I want to move on, but I'm just worried about, what Sam or Michelle will say, right? But then if you give yourself the opportunity to talk it out and say, it was a great run for us, but right now I'm going to try something else. And then you're able to preserve the respect and the value that you have for each other. And then in the future, it will be easy to tap them again and say, hey, you know what? It's been a while, but I have this idea and I think you and I will be a perfect fit again. So, try to never burn bridges as much as you can. But if they're such jerks, then maybe you can close them.
Nicely put. And I'll add to that too about what you just said there, is that it is hard to define when a relationship is going to start and when it's going to end. But kind of what you just said there is that when you see it concluding, when you see it wrapping up, when you see the writing on the wall that we just talked about, is that you, as a leader, can start putting in some actions, some different activities that will help move this process towards your goal now, to be able to exit the relationship properly and with respect and with dignity, as you just mentioned there. I would like another question as we start. There we go, fantastic. We have Rocky here, awesome.
So, is in my understanding that good collaboration is dependent on differences, because if you all are the same, it's not going to be effective. You may as well be by yourself. How do you distinguish between positive differences and negative differences? Because while some differences can make something better, I think also there's differences that should cause that or should not be on the team, if that makes sense.
I think it's the level of aggravation that it causes you.
I told you she's a feelings person.
You'll know it. If it's really aggravating, working with this other person, and it brings more stress than you just gotta weigh it, Feel it out. You just gotta weigh it. How much stress am I willing to endure, right? Second, can I do something so that I can alleviate my personal stress when I'm dealing with this person, right? And lastly, ask someone else. Ask someone else, right? That's a form of collaboration, hey, I'm really having a hard time collaborating with this person. Maybe there's someone else, in the leadership that can give you more insight. maybe they've had more experience in terms of dealing with, or if you're the leader, then speak with another leader who might, and also speak to the person, like, hey, it's been really challenging working with you, right? How can we make this better? Because honestly, I want to make it work, but like, if you're not helping me, this can't go on, dude. It just can't.
Love that.
So I'm looking at my phone for a reason because I put some notes in there. Relative, you know.
She knew this question was coming.
Well, I did not know. But I think to what Cecile is saying is that, you know, you find yourself in these situations and sometimes you sense them before the group gets together. And sometimes you don't realize, and you're like, oh boy, this person's a loose cannon, and how am I going to deal with that, right? Let's talk about the ones that give you, that are not collaborating, they're not team players. And so how do you do that? So you can try to prevent it. You ask the people, if you're the leader informing the group, you vet them, you do your homework. One of the things that I did before I sold a thing was I asked my family and my friends, what do you think of this? Can you help me? I have a lawyer friend, my sister's an accountant. I trust them. And so that kind of, you know, you already know them, right? A lot of times you want to collaborate with friends because you have these mutual likes and interests and personalities. And so I think that would be a good thing to use people and know them first, do your research. But let's say you get on a group and you have no idea who you're working with. I think the group as a whole will figure out who the negative Nancys are. Debbie Downers. Why are they all women names? I just realized that. Yeah, negative Nick.
I got some negative names for some men.
Annoying Andy.
What is it called?
Annoying Andy.
Annoying Andy. Yeah, I like that. But you know, you can't. You know, you have to figure out as a group. Okay, if someone doesn't meet that criteria, if they're then not the right person, not the right fit, or not at the right time, how are you going to handle that? Again, it depends on the size of the project or the collaboration that you're doing. You know, in terms of the positive experiences, well, there's no problem there. Everybody's in their lane, they're doing their thing. They're respectful to the different opinions that are happening in that group. They're empathetic to situations that arise. So, you know, I hope I answered you right too.
So I think we're talking a lot about sort of like situations where you're in kind of forced collaboration, right? Where you're put on a team and you have to work with somebody, right? Is sort of, I think, at the crux of what you're talking about. And when you asked your question, the first thing that popped into my head was when you talk about differences, like the way I think, to me, differences are not inherently good or bad, right? Differences are just different. They can cause friction, but I don't think they're inherently good or bad, right? So that's just my perspective and kind of the way I approach situations like that. The other thing is that when you're in a situation where you have to collaborate with someone, often, even if you have differences of opinion, even if you have different approaches to accomplishing the work, you're working towards the same goal, right? And so I think making sure that you maintain focus on that shared value that you have with that person is an incredibly important way to keep the collaboration on track. That while you may have differences of opinion, you may have differences in the way you want to approach solving the problem, ultimately you're there to solve the same problem. Ultimately you have the same values, and it's important to just remind each other regularly that you share those values and that you're there to accomplish the same thing so that you can work together towards that goal so that you can overcome the friction that comes from having differences.
Thanks, guys. And I'm thinking about when Cecile was saying, check your ego out the door, I'm thinking about this table of equality. Of you have a table where the egos are checked, you have everybody's on the same footing, and you have this person, as you mentioned, might be negative or whatever, but reestablishing, going back to that table of equality, because as we go in our lanes, our egos start building again, because now we're in our lanes, we're taking on this energy, we're building momentum, and there's this, it just kind of biologically happens, and so now these leaders come back together, and all of a sudden there's this friction, and they don't know why, and so I go back to my basketball analogy of call a timeout. Go back to this table of equality. And Pam, I think all three of you said this, not specifically like this, but Get to the root of it by asking open-ended questions, by asking powerful questions. Are we on the same mission? Do we have the same values? Are we working towards the same goal? How can we participate together? How can I participate? How can I bring my team in? So it's asking those questions, because sometimes that negative person, that person that's having this negative aura around them, it's a lot of the times, and please just share on this with me, because they feel they may not be being heard, or they've shared a lot of ideas and maybe they kind of fell flat, or maybe they're just not succeeding in their lane and they might need a little bit more help and they don't know how to ask for that, especially when you have a leader who has a strong ego. Any thoughts on that? No? Fantastic. We'll move on. We do have a question there, and then you're next. If you could just, thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Cecilia. Cecilia as well. Cecilia. Actually, Cecilia is the one doing my social media marketing. I have 2 businesses. She calls me a serial entrepreneur. So, with my experience, I have, I think animosity is the worst part when it comes to the topic that we discussed. Like, everybody's different. Everybody's ego. But then, in collaboration, there's a goal that we reach. There are specialties among the collaborators to reach that goal. But then, because of ego or whatever reason or personality differences, then there will be animosities. How do we control? If you are in that situation, how do we do damage control? Especially when that person you still need that person, but then that person talks, can I say the word, talk shit about you, or talk shit about the organization. How do you do damage control?
That's for you guys.
That's for me. I mean, honestly, my gut reaction to that is firmly. Look, at the end of the day, I'm there to accomplish a goal, and I want everyone to have a good time and to enjoy the work that we're doing together. But I'm definitely not going to tolerate someone bad-mouthing the work that we're doing, members of the team, et cetera, that has no place in any collaboration. That behavior is antithetical to collaborating. So yeah, my response to how I would react to that or handle that would be firmly and swiftly.
To that, and I agree wholeheartedly, firmly, swiftly, and I think it also depends on what you said talk shit about you. Like, first of all, nobody should be talking shit about anybody in a collaboration. But it happens, and there could be reasons behind it. I am the type of person and leader where I want to understand why. And I want to know why now, and it's not tolerated. And that sets the tone for the entire group, because the group will break down if people can treat each other that way. It's not always easy. And there are things said that you'll never know about as a leader, right? It's just the nature of things, but you can get a sense of it. And I trust my mom intuition like crazy. Like, I know there's something's happening, and you want to get on it. You want to address it right away, and sit that person or people down quickly and privately, and understand what's going on, and let them know that you are not going to tolerate that, or you will not allow them to treat other people that way. But the first question is why? Why would you say that?
Do you want a response, Cecile? You don't have to.
Just to add,
Oh, yeah.
that's why when I say collaboration or being partner, you have to be a cult. Just it's a joke.
A cult personality of
No, it's a
buy-in.
It's a cult, like the loyalty.
The loyalty to each other.
Like business party, business partner.
Business
You
partner.
have to be some kind of, you have to have loyalty to each other. Cult is a bad word, but I would jokingly say you have to be cult.
for each other.
Right, so intertwined, so seeing of the same vision that it's almost a religious experience, is what you're saying. We do have a question up front here I want to get to here. Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Lori. Before the question, I did wanted to add a little bit. We're talking about leadership and we're talking about relationships, right? I think that as leaders, we have to learn respect for each other. That's where our collaboration starts. In the first place, you decided to collaborate with that person for a reason. Sometimes forced reasons, sometimes because you choose to, right? And I believe that it's a matter of perspective as well. Sometimes somebody may be perceived as somebody negative, or like they're bringing something negative into the table, but many times it's that they're misunderstood. So my question is, in your leadership, what are some of the key things that you apply to take in consideration every perspective before you make a decision?
I think it's important to appreciate the value of checks and balances in whatever kind of relationship. So some people, they might speak up, not necessarily agreeing with you in the beginning because they might be seeing something or there's some uncertainties there that they want to address. So, and that's why in collaboration, it's not just about one person. That's why there's other people, so that they could also offer their insight into how to make it better. So it's important to consider what they have to offer, because if you marinate on it, they might actually have a point, and that might actually help you come up with a better proposal, that will ultimately help you achieve your vision. But in the same way that we should also acknowledge perhaps the differences between a person who's maybe positively contributing to the checks and balances, and also a team member that, for the lack of a better word, is generally that is detrimental to the general health of the organization or of the partnership. And that's when a collaboration ends, when they're no longer, bringing the value that they so promised when they entered the collaboration.
I want to just go back to what you just said there, and I think it's also about giving some space, some room, and you just said something, marinate was the word that you use, and a fun word in the kitchen, and in business. It's allowing some space, and as you said, is looking at listening to people and looking at them from the idea that they might have something of value to bring, but also looking at the best in people. In that, okay, this person may have responded in a way that might seem negative, that might not seem positive. Let me marinate on this. Let me give it some room to breathe. Let me think about it in that they might have had the best intentions in what they said. And then we've talked about this, confronting the issue, confronting it and giving it some space, building some context, allowing them to build some context around what they've said, what they've done, how they're acting, and to be very, it's to listen to them. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we said it earlier, was listening, right? And as you're ready, yeah, go ahead.
And I think you have to put it to some context to answer these questions specifically. If you have someone who's, and I won't go into HR issues, but if you've got someone who's mean and said something offensive, that should be handled pretty quickly, because then it affects other people. But if it's, and in a collaboration, it usually will, they'll all pick up on it, and they're going to look to the leader like, okay, how are you going to handle this? There are things that, and it's personalities too. Some people are more subtle with their things, and you can kind of understand what's happening. You can read the room, and really, figure out if I need to get on it right away or pause. In the education world, there's a structure called Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, PBIS. And what they do when a child has an episode in the classroom, they don't bring the child outside and say, okay, what's wrong? How can I help? No, the first thing is to pause and move, but that's a separate thing. But to pause and just remove the child from the classroom so they can think about what happened and why it happened, but there's no question. So there's a lot of validity, I think, to certain situations where you're taking it in, you're closing your door, and you're going, oof, what just happened, and how am I going to handle it?
So if I'm remembering your question right, you were asking about how do you make sure that everyone on the team feels heard, am I right? Is that what you asked?
And it was about being misinterpreted, right?
It's more about what tools do you apply in your experience to deal with, it's not just.
Here.
There's always two sides of the coin. I'm always, Cecile knows me, I'm always all about perspective, and I like to put myself in other people's shoes first, right? So I would like to know from you, in your experience, what are some of the tools or the things that you apply in order to take everybody in consideration before you get to that decision?
Gotcha. Yeah, so I do, there's a couple of things that I do, specifically. One is I ask a lot of questions, right? And I ask open-ended questions. So what did you think about this? How did it make you feel? Why did it make you feel that way? What do you think could be done differently? What do you think could be done better? What do you think we should do instead? Like open-ended questions that allow people to sort of express their opinions. And then, because I don't always follow what they would like me to do, right? If we're in a collaboration, I don't always go the path that they would go if they were in my position, right? I am very transparent about my decision making, and I'm very careful to make sure that they understand exactly why I'm making the decision I'm making, right? And why I believe that it will lead to a good outcome for everyone in the situation. And then the last thing is just a very simple one. I make it a point to always say thank you when someone offers an opinion or answers a question for me, so that they know that I appreciate that they stepped up and shared their thoughts and their opinions and their feelings on a matter, and made them clear, which is sometimes uncomfortable for people, especially, I think it's incredibly valuable. Often people who are younger or just starting out in a career or a profession get overlooked when you're taking opinions into consideration. The sort of in my world, the production assistants, the PAs, right, on a set are often never asked what they think or what they see or what they hear, right? And I make it a point to ask everybody, right? And I know sometimes it's scary for those folks who are, young or early in their careers and don't have experience behind them to sort of lend them confidence in expressing those opinions, to stand up in front of other more senior experienced people and say what they think or see or feel. So I always make sure to say thank you, to make sure that everyone knows that it's appreciated and that their contributions, even if it didn't steer where we're going, are still valued.
So I think to help kind of bring this all together for you, for everyone here, is what I've heard, and I think that this applies to when dealing with the negative personality, the misunderstood person, and even at the level of collaboration, is that we're taking some time to think. We're allowing everybody to think, because even when we're collaborating, we all need some time to think about this relationship. We're asking powerful questions. We're asking them very powerful questions, intuitive questions. We're asking them how questions, what questions, open-ended type of questions. We're not making any assumptions or judgments. And the one that I think is very powerful that they all contributed to is using your resources. We made a little joke about HR, but that's a resource. HR is a resource. Your network is a resource. Your friends, your family are a resource, which was all mentioned here. And that's when we're thinking about somebody who's maybe troubling the relationship, but also when we're thinking about collaborating. And as we kind of bring this to a close, part of what I started with was that we're talking about collaborating in business, but also in life. And so I would like to just finalize this show with asking any audience members here, or concluding the show, thank you, just mess up, anyway. Concluding the show here, asking you if you have any questions for our panel here about collaboration in life. not just in business, but in life. Does anybody have any questions in terms of that? Yes, Shanta.
Thank you. It's business or life, similar structure we follow. In collaboration, mainly it's synergy. That's the reason we are, otherwise we can be alone in life or in business. We are capable of doing and producing a good outcome. So we don't need to collaborate. We are collaborating because we have a synergy. When we collaborate, our output is better. So, and the transparency, we also need to have the transparency, and that's my perspective. I want to know if you have anything to add on, or if you think that's incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree that more often than not, especially for me, speaking from my personal experience, the collaborations that I enter into, because I've kind of built my life and my business this way, are because I want to collaborate with those people and not because I'm generally forced into it, right? I'm fortunate in that respect that I've sort of constructed my reality to allow for that. And so, yeah, I think with that in mind, I think there's a couple of ways that I look and find people that I want to collaborate with, look for and find those people. And that is, one, a word that you use, being authentic. I try to be, as authentic as I can be in sort of everything I do in all of my communications and all of my work, whether that's personal projects or for my clients or in day-to-day interactions with clients or in meetings or prospective clients, etc. I'm me all the time, right? There is no business me, fun me. I'm just me, and I don't have the energy to try to be somebody else half of the time. That sounds exhausting, and I'm not interested. So I'm just like as authentic as I can be all the time, and I'm authentic to sort of my mission, right? And that's something that I encourage everybody here to do if you own a business or work for a business. Look at the mission statement involved in that business, right? And then be authentic to that mission in all of your collaborations and in all of your communications so that you can attract the right people to collaborate with. So, I'll just use myself as an example again, because I know my experience best, but my mission is to humanize the world of business through better communications, right? That is what I'm on a mission to do. And I know that I'm never going to be at a point in my life when I can tick that box and lean back on a couch like this and say, well, I'm done. So I'm always going to be pursuing that mission. I'm always going to be looking for people who share those same kinds of values to collaborate with. So yeah, I think being authentic to your mission, to who you are and what you want to accomplish in the world is key to finding the right synergies and the right people to collaborate with, professionally and personally.
So I actually have 3 thoughts that I want to leave with you. 3. Do we have time for 3?
No,
Okay.
time for your 3.
Okay. So when I was growing up, my dad was always like, talking to everybody, spending so much time in the community, and constantly just spending a lot of energy, just being with people and talking to people and just being with people and talking to people, basically. And, I understood the general concept of, community and collaboration and whatnot, but a part of me was like, a little bit jealous about the time and the energy that he spent, with all these people. Like, feel like, okay, you're talking to everybody, but there's not enough time for us, in the home. So we're talking about life in general. So, and I never really understood what that was, until I was older, and I also started spending time with people and, spending my energy on working on things, working on a greater mission, working on one. And I felt that like, wow, okay, so this was this was what this was all about, you know. He had the talents, he had the skills, and honestly, it would really be selfish for us as children to not let him share, you know, what he has to the rest of the world. And when he passed, he didn't leave me like $1 million. No, that's not the case. But he left me with contacts. Now that he's gone, all his former contacts now go to me. You know, they talk to me about whatever, and they tell me, they go to me. And the lesson I learned from that is contacts is your currency. Contacts is currency. And your contacts is your currency. And in the same way that you are a currency to your contacts, right? So what we do in order to make the most out of this fact is we constantly attempt to bring value, offer value to our contacts, right? So that when the time comes that we also want to communicate to our contacts what we want to happen, you know, it's easy to get a yes. Because we're constantly bringing value, we're constantly offering value to all of them. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thanks, Cecile. Yeah.
Can I chime in a little bit? I think what you're saying, the question is really about like, you know, I don't want to say company culture, but a culture of the group, whatever, if it's in business or life. And like I've shared, I worked in some firms, and they were pretty rigid. You know, Cube Farm, remember those? Anybody here at Cube Farms, right? Everybody was in a cubicle. The type of atmosphere that you create, whether it's, you know, in a conference room or a coffee shop, it should really represent who you are, talking about your authenticity and transparency and synergy. And people are really good at figuring out who the figures, the wannabes, are in the room. You can figure that out pretty quickly, right? And so the worst thing you want to do is pretend to be someone that you're not. So it was important to me when I finally was fortunate enough to have offices of my own and employees of my own, is to create that atmosphere where that represents the best part of me. It's a fun, engaging, colorful environment. That's the nature of what we do. It's aligned with the mission. It's who I am. You know, business is hard. Collaborating is hard. Leading is hard. And the last thing people, employees or co-collaborators want to do is have a tough meeting. So again, going back to even one of the original questions, as the leader, you have the obligation to set the tone of the meeting or the atmosphere, and just be yourself and let those values come through. I know there's a lot of good people here. I can see it in their eyes.
To be your authentic self, and that's something that we could bring in business and bring into our personal lives. To be yourself, to stand true to your values, to stand in your integrity. I'd like us all to give a nice hand to our wonderful panel. A few notes in closing. We have our last event scheduled here in January. That is going to be the first Wednesday in January, I believe. I have it here, all this beliefs. It is going to be on the 4th, January 4th. We will have our next event, our final event here, and then we're going to be re-talking about that contract, Kirsty. I'm just kidding. No, we love it here. I mean, look at this awesome stage. I was just thinking about when Tom was just talking about, you know, when I'm all said and done, I could sit on this couch and it's just like, you're in the heavens, man. Right? It's awesome. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. And in this spirit of collaboration, I see Julie already went off to start working on it. We want to invite you all to Faux Tibet, which is just up the road. And the New Pulse Connective is going to be hosting their event tonight, and they have a fun, interactive event going on, networking event, get to know each other on a different level, some food, drinks. Well, we're not paying for the drinks, but there'll be some food there, right? And some games and activities. Do you want to share anything, Nicole, before everybody heads out?
Come. We have a prize for
And they always give out awesome prizes. They have some really, really cool prizes. So before I let you all go, because this went viral, which means 30 likes on my Instagram. We're gonna take a selfie together. So just hang on, everyone. I got it ready. I was prepping it. Can my panelists turn around and be in this? And everybody give me your best, like, fun face, your fun arms, throw some gestures in there. You can scream and shout, it's all right. The selfie doesn't have to be silent. Wow. All right, make believe you liked it here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a wonderful evening.